It's much easier than being a prime minister. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming here this afternoon on a beautiful day. As I was telling Laura before, it's very difficult to bring people in this nice weather and leave the good macchiatos and the great ceilings that are out there and come to listen to us. But I think this is a great opportunity. We have Rob Benjamin here. Rob is a great friend that I have known almost for 10 years now in Washington. We have had many, many discussions about issues related to Kosovo, and I have found him to be one of the persons who will give you always an objective opinion about what's going on here. He's very knowledgeable about the developments that we have had in the past 10 years in Kosovo, and even before that. And he represents an organization that has been very much involved here in Kosovo in democracy building. And when discussing what we're going to be talking here today, and it's going back and forth with emails, I was thinking about this idea of talking what the role the international community plays in democracy building. We know that the international community in Kosovo plays a very, very crucial role. But these are the questions that we want to tackle today, and we will have this presentation very informal. Rob will give us a presentation on this topic, and we will discuss them afterwards with your questions, our questions, and questions from people here in the audience, and to try to really have a conversation about democracy. This Democracy Day on the 15th it was, I guess. So I think it's a great purpose to talk about democracy, and is it the best form of government, and is it working here with us, and has the international community done a good job in this direction? So a lot of questions that we can discuss here today, but without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Rob and see what he has to say on this topic.
Ilya, thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. It's nice to see you again here in Pristina at AUK. And I want to thank Chris as well for a warm welcome. And had a chance to visit AUK several times now, and I've always enjoyed my time here. I'm really happy too that I have some colleagues from India, Kosovo, kind of parade here in the front row. I expect maybe the toughest questions may come from them, but I'm happy to have them here today. I'm going to start maybe with just a few background points about my organization, just to kind of give you a perspective of where NDI is coming from and kind of how I look at these questions. And there are multiple questions, of course, not just one. I'm not going to talk explicitly about democratization in Kosovo. I'm going to maybe talk a little bit more broadly, but we can obviously talk about the democratization process in Kosovo, and we can talk about the role of the international community in that process here, maybe during the questions and answers. I thought I would talk a little bit more about some of the broader concepts and arguments and ideas that are shaping democracy assistance. So just a word then about NDI. We are a non-governmental organization. We are funded in large part, but not uniquely, by the U.S. government. But interestingly, we maintain a non-governmental status. So we believe that democracy assistance should not be provided by a government per se, and that's almost for philosophical reasons, but rather as an NGO, we can work in the field of democracy, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, in a more effective way as a non-governmental organization. We are based in Washington, D.C. We have existed since 1983. We were formed by an act of the U.S. Congress that created several organizations in what was this new field of democracy promotion, democracy support, what have you. We have a board. Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State, someone who's quite familiar here at Kosovo, is the chair of that board. And actually back in the early 80s as a professor at Georgetown was one of the founding members of NDI. We are an organization that we have an affiliation, a nominal affiliation, I would say, with the Democratic Party in the United States. And we have a sister organization, the International Republican Institute, IRI, that is nominally affiliated with the Republican Party in the United States. You have, in effect, at least by birth, two organizations that would call themselves, as we do, a political party institute. We also, in effect, represent I can't quite say that. We don't represent the Democratic Party abroad, but we sort of serve as an international relations organization, loosely defined in that manner, as does IRI. And then you had two other organizations formed as well. One is the Center for International Private Enterprise, and that's a business development organization that creates such things as chambers of commerce in the way that business comes into the public affairs and governance system. And then you have the Solidarity Center for International Labor, which is a trade union support organization. So democracy assistance back in the 1980s was a sort of Washington formula of the two main political parties, business and labor, as major constituent groups. That has evolved certainly since then. Going to what we do at NDI, we work around the world. We currently work in about 70 countries, and we engage political, civic, and governmental institutions on a variety of things that could be understood as democratization or political reform. We do work with political parties in terms of their organizational development, their ability to establish their ideological orientations, their policy platforms, their outreach to the public, all those things that a party needs to do in a democracy. We work with them on, and we do that in a multi-partisan manner. So we work across the mainstream spectrum of political parties. We don't choose sides, in other words. We work with civic groups in terms of issue advocacy, government monitoring, and other elements that allow civic groups to come into the process to help shape either legislative decisions, policies, outcomes, or be a part of the political process, monitoring how that process is working. Essentially being, as parties are, a connection, filling the space between government on the one hand and citizens on the other. And we work a lot with parliaments, again, as that connecting institution, as an elected political body, as a legislative body making laws, and as a separate branch of government that, as we know, constitutionally and in a democracy, needs to oversee the work of government. So what I've just outlined for you are the basic tenets of the work that we do in the field of democracy that speaks to those institutions and those processes, legislation, elections, what have you, that make up or the content of politics, which takes me to my sort of an essential point that I think NDI has when we come to the question of democracy. We see democracy essentially as politics. We see democracy as politics because it is through politics that government is oriented to the citizens, or not. It is through elections, it is through legislation, it is through all manner of participation, openness, government accountability, government transparency, that determines whether or not one can say, we have a government that is respecting human rights, we have a government that respects or tries to respect the public interest. We understand, by the way, what the public interest is because we have civil society groups and we have members of parliament and we have conversations about what needs to be done. We have fair elections that reflect the will of the people. We have a number of things that are translated and manifest in politics that tell us whether or not we are achieving the values of democracy and that we, can be said, are practicing democracy in our country. So that's kind of the perspective that NDI has in coming to this work. I'm going to talk now just for a minute about democracy promotion, having outlined a little bit anyway, conceptually, how we define what democracy is. So if you know what it is, then you can figure out how to promote it. And I told you a little bit about what in fact we do working with